The Consortium announced and released the 2 June 2023 on Warhammer Community the new rules for the Warhammer 10th edition Leviathan that it's yet to be released the set box about. Still, there's been released these ones. I leave the link about this article of the Warhammer Community in the description as the vlog about this edition, because you can, for example, understand if it's worth or not the set box. And here we can find quite a lot of things, because we can find that here there is the part about, but there is also the video where it explains simply the rules, the main ones about the game. So this is really quite important, because it's a way to see really quite soon how it works. I can anticipate you that it works quite a lot like the previous edition, but there are some changes that are quite important that are mixed from Age of Sigmar and others that are renewed, and it's really quite systematic, so I quite like, and I hope that this edition that is seem quite nice anyway will not have the problems that we were seeing with the previous editions, mainly the 9th edition, because I had the problem about the codexes. So I'm really quite interested about seeing. So remember that you can download such rules, and I suggest you to do, because okay, technically you will not have yet the things about the options for the rules, so the various codices and so on, but we have seen the focus about different arms and so on, and we have seen something. So eventually you can try some mock game and so on, that it could be really quite interesting eventually to try, because in a way there are enough information if you combine everything to play small games, and it could be really quite intriguing. But now we're going to go to see mainly about the rules themselves. I like quite a lot the PDF that has been released, because it has the structure of a manual, really. I think that it's a part of the, like I said, core book that has been simply extracted and brought here. So we have the core rules, and we can find a lot of things like images and so on, but we can find also the instruction, and from the instruction we can find how it works, the sequence, so the command phase, the movement phase, the shooting phase, the charge phase, and the fight phase. So really quite similar about Age of Sigmar, about the structure. But if you see, you don't see the Battleshock phase, because it's inside the command phase. We'll see later. Still, it's something that I look for. Here we can find the concept, so the part about the main rules, the Battleround, the Datasheet, the strategic results, the abilities, and so on. We can find also the hints and tips, and remember that these are quite important. Are usually on the side part of the main text, but they give you quite a lot of information, mainly also some rules about, so you have to remember to read about. The summaries are something that it's really useful, because it lets you to read the text, because it's a field of concept information and so on, but if you want to have a fast review about what the tests say, and so have a fast learning about, this is quite important. But remember that it's a summary. A lot of information are still in the full text that you can read, so remember about. And then we can find everything, and we can find so about the core concept of such things. And then we can find about the core concept. Remember that here we are yet talking about the rules. So we have the part about the mission. We see some example later in this same video. We have about the armies, that it's about the all models that you are going to play under your command. So it's something simple but important. Have the units, so how they can be defined. So the concept about unit, friendly models, and enemy models. Had the part about the datasheet, we see example later eventually. Then we had the keyword. This is a concept that it's really quite important, because it defines what you can use. Because it defines, for example, if a unit it's an infantry, if it's an support or so on, but it defines also if the unit can take some stratagems applied or so on. So it's really quite the must to remember that the keywords are a must-have concept that you have in your mind. Then how about the unit currency? This is something that we have seen yet previously, so in the previous edition it's not so different. So we had that the unit currency is 2 inch one model from each other horizontally and 5 inch vertically. So it's quite interesting. But remember that this is from one other model if the unit is from 2 to 6 models, instead if from other 2 models if the unit has 7 or more models. So you have to pay attention about the ribbons to create at the end of eventually a straight line that you can create with a unit, for example, to create a sort of wiring or so on, about that, because you want to block the passage of enemy units and so on. It can be really quite interesting, but you have to remember such thing. And remember that at the end of every turn, if a unit is not in a unit currency that we have yet seen, this that make that control operator must remove models until that unit is a unit currency again. So you have to pay quite a lot of attention about such things, because it can make you lose even more models eventually, or you have to sacrifice some models to save yourself. There are a lot of bonus and malus eventually, but you have to remember such rules because it's important. They have about the engagement range that is about being close to the enemy. So you are going to combat the enemy itself, and the engagement range is 1 inch horizontally and 5 inch vertically. Remember the currency that we've seen before. And remember that models cannot be set up or end a normal, advance, or fallback move with engagement range of any unit. So it's quite important because you have to keep a distance from the enemy unit if you're not in close combat, so to distinguish from each other. And about falling back, okay, you fall back from a combat, but you can't finish close to in the engagement or zone of another unit, so you have to pay attention about this. About the intertypes, it's about the volume models that it serves to understand if the models can be put in a certain position, because maybe it's unstable, the turn itself or the position that you are going to use. So it's something that you can adapt, basically. Usually use a dice on another dice to understand if it's worth or not, but okay. So you have to pay a bit of attention eventually. They had about the terrain features that are what you create the battlefield with. And then we had the measuring distances. This it's always quite important. Remember that when you move a model, you measure from or the front to the front again, or from the back to the back again, not from the front to the back of the model. So remember that you have to pay attention, because you think about from the front to the back. You add also the base completely. It's not fair. So pay attention about such thing, because it's important to remember that you can't do this. So the maximum distance that you move, it's the movement that you can create. The base can't be added. The limit is when you move the model to the maximum of it. So pay attention about such thing. And really, here you have to pay quite a lot of attention, because it's about the measuring distances and so on, but it's important. And then we have something that it's always a problem, but here it's explained as it should be. So we have determined the visibility, so if a model is in the line to sight also or not. So we have to distinguish about the model that is visible, the unit that is visible, a model that is full visible, and a unit that is fully visible. So here explain perfectly how it can be done. It doesn't say about a percentage of a mod that can be fully visible or partially visible. So if the mod is fully visible, it's obvious. If you see only even a small part of the mod, then it's partially visible. So pay attention about such things, because it's important. Then we had the part about the dice. So we had also the definition of what it is a d6 or a d3. So a d3 is the result of 1 or 2, it's 1, 3 and 4, it's 2, 5 or 6, it's 3. Then we had the hint and also about the dice rolling, so that technically if you're not certain if the dice is on plain face, you can use another dice to see if it screw and roll out or stay there. But anyway, it's not quite a problem eventually. Then about the rules. So we had a definition about the unmodified dice. So the result after the rules, but before any modifiers. The dice cannot be rolled more than once, so you can make more rollers for the same dice, only once you can do. Then you have that, remember that you must roll a dice if several need adding together. and the rules are applied before any modifiers. So this is really quite important. The roll-off is you confront your result with the one of your opponent, is simply. Then we have the sequences, so you can find how it occurs the things, so the sequence of the options applied. So it's quite interesting, but it's something that you have to pay attention, because the player whose turn it is choose the order. So it's quite simple eventually. And then we can start to see about the battle round itself. About the battle round, we have seen something related before, but here we have the description about the various phases of the battle round itself. Remember that the battle round is composed in your turn and your opponent turn, based on who starts first. So we have the command phase, the movement phase, the shooting phase, the charge phase, and the fight phase. Remember that once the player turn has ended, their opponent then starts their turn. Once both players has completed a turn, the battle round has been completed and the next one begins, and so on until the battle ends. Usually when you go to make a game, if you end the time, it's the norm to make that the battle round ends. So if your turn, you make the opponent have its turn if it's finished the battle round. So pay attention about such details, because they are really quite important. And then had the command phase. This is something that it's divided in two things, the command and the battle shock. So you have to remember about such things. About the command, remember that at the start of your command phase, before doing anything else, both players gain one command point. So you and your opponent, same in the turn of your opponent. So remember about such thing, because it's really quite important. And remove that you have to remove any other rules that occur in the command phase before to move to the battle shock part. And also about gaining command point, remember that other than the command point that you gain in the command phase, you can have only one more command point along the turn that it's regardless of any source. So you can improve of one simple command point eventually. Remember about such, because it's really quite important. Then we have the part that it's about the battle shock. So in this step, you take the battle shock test for each of your unit on the battlefield that is below a strength. We'll see later about such things. To do so, roll 2d6 if the result is greater than or equal to the best leadership characteristic in that unit. Remember that this is quite important. Sincerely, when I read the first time about this, I thought that it was a problem, because I'm used that usually it's under the leadership to pass. Instead, here it's higher, equal or higher, but it's okay. So if it's such, so it's greater or equal, then the test is passed. Otherwise, the test is failed, and the unit at the start of until the start of your next command phase, it's battle shocked. While unit is battle shocked, remember that the object control characteristic of all of its model is 0, and it's quite important to control the objectives, as the name implies. So it's really important. If it fallbacks, you must take a desperate escape test for every model in that unit. We'll see also about this, but it's not a pleasant thing eventually. And its controller player can choose stratagem to affect that unit. This it's quite problematic, because it's something that can forbid you to make some options, because technically the unit can behave normally, but has some disadvantage, and not be able to use the stratagems, it's a bad one things. So once that you have taken the battle test for all your units that require them, your command phase end and your progress to the movement phase. So remember that here are the things that are really quite important, because this it's something that can change your control of the objects and so on. It's really quite important one. You don't risk to lose models, but still it's important. About the starting strength, it's the number of models a unit contain when it's added to your army, and is known as starting strength. About the below a strength that you've seen before, it's that it's referred to a unit that is, or if a unit has a starting strength of 1, for example, the single charter and so on, that is said to be below a strength, while it is, remember, the number of wounds is less than half of its wound characteristic. So if a model has 5 wounds, it has 2 wounds remaining, but remember that are single models only, or for any other unit, while the number of models in that unit is less than half of its starting strength, that unit is said to be below the strength. It's defined also the destroyed composite, and there is something that is quite important because it's about the attached unit. So it's some charters, remember, that have to have the keyword charters. The units have the leader ability that we see later. The starting strength of an attached unit is equal to the combined starting strength of all its units. So for example, if the number of mod in the leader unit added to the number of mod to the bodyguard unit, if either the leader unit or the bodyguard unit is an attached unit is destroyed, the starting strength of the remaining unit is changed to the equal of its original starting strength, so it's not a problem. And for the purpose of the rules that are triggered when a unit is destroyed, such rules are triggered when one of the individual units that made up an attached unit is destroyed, the leader or the bodyguard. It's quite important to understand this because it's a way to avoid some misunderstanding eventually. So I like the images and so on are all but nice. And then we can move to the movement phase. And then have the movement phase. Here we have move the unit or the part about the reinforcement. So about move the unit, we have 2 options. If we are not in the engagement range, we have that the unit can make eventually a normal move, advance, or remain stationary. Instead, if it is within the engagement range that we had talked before, remember that it can remain stationary or fall back, so escape from the engagement. So remember about such thing because it's really quite important. You have to move one unit after the other, and each time you move a unit, you can move any of its model you choose, and to the controller player choose the order in which move their model. Whenever you move a model, you can pivot it or change its position on the battlefield along any path, but no part of its base can be moved across any model or cross the edge on the battlefield. Remember about such one, and remember that it talk about the base. It's important about this. It can be moved freely over the friendly models, and this is really quite important, other than it's a monster or vehicle. So the keyword monster and vehicle can't do move over other than the half-life, but we'll see later. So such model, you have to pay attention about such thing because it's something that it's problematic eventually, and you have to pay attention. Then remember that the distance move is measured using the part of its base that move furthest along its path. So if you do such things, you have to pay attention. Moreover, you have to pay attention about that you can pivot it or change its position on the battlefield along any path, because you have to pay attention that if you pivot it while moving, you can't make add or so that you arrive and then pivot. The pivoting is included in the movement. Pay attention about such one. So it's something simply but important. You can remain stationary. It means simply that it stays where it is without moving, obviously. And about the normal moves, we had the option about being the characteristic movement in the datasheet that is stabilize how much it can move, simply but always to remember. But remember that no model move that it's engaged with any enemy models, but we have other option about, we can say the option to be moved with the engagement, but we'll see later. They had the advanced moves that it's the running, so you make that the movement plus a d6. Remember that you cannot move with engagement range of any enemy models, obviously, and units that advance cannot shoot or charge this turn. So it's really quite important to remember. They had the fallback moves that simply you make that you fall back, so you use the movement to detach from the combat. Remember that the unit cannot shoot or declare charge in the same turn that it's fell back. There are obviously successively the different options on to make the exceptions, but it's these the rules. And the desperate escape test, it's when you are surrounded and you can't simply move, as you see in the scheme under here. So pay attention about such thing, because if you try to do so, with the mount you are able to make bypass the enemy unit that it's circling you, and you have any way to make that you use the movement, so you have to pay attention that you are able to do such. Unit that fallback cannot shoot or declare a charge in the same turn. Models can move over enemy models when falling back, but you must take the desperate test. That it's something that it does include the Titanic or models that are fly, so at least they fly as a bonus. If a Battleshock unit is selected to fall back, take a desperate test for every model in that unit, and the desperate escape test, roll a d6 on a 1 and 2, one model from that unit is destroyed. So it's really quite intriguing about such, because it means that each time that you use this for a model, you do such. So it's really bad, because you roll for each and doesn't mind how many wounds the model has. If it do 1 or 2, it's lost. So pay attention, because it's useful, but it can be also quite problematic about, so try not to make yourself surrounded by the enemy. And I've had the moving over terrain that explain how you can move, and here I quite like, because it explains perfectly how you can move over the terrain itself. So models can move freely over terrain feature that has 2 or less in height, but models cannot move through terrain feature that are taller than 2 inches, but can climb on it, up and down on it instead. So you have to remember about such a distinguish, because it means that if higher than 2 inch, you can move through. Otherwise, you have to consider that you have to move up and down to bypass it. So even if you have to move only 1 inch forward, you can even lose all your movement to do such things. About flying, it's something that has the keyword fly. So the fly models can move over enemy models that when they make a normal move, advance, or fall back move. And fly models start or end a move on a turn feature, move through the air when they make a normal move, advance, or fall back. Remember that you have to make a diagonal one. So higher is the shining feature that you are moving up, it's closer the things, so you have to pay quite a lot of attention about such options. So it's really quite important to understand how it works, because it's not straight when you go to see up on the battlefield, but you have to measure from the base to the base again, the diagonal that let you do such things. So it's really quite interesting. Remember about the example that we've seen before, that it's a round base. If it will be a oval and you pivot it, remember that you have to measure from the front eventually. So pay attention eventually. And then we have the part about the reinforcement, that is always in the movement phase. About this, the reserve units are units that start the battle in a location other than the battlefield, that can be reserved, that can be high in the sky, something like this. Always count as having made a normal move in the turn that are set up on the battlefield, so they arrive and they don't move anymore. Any specified distance from enemy models applies to the horizontal distance. This is quite important, because it makes that you are not trying to buff and so on, trying to make that it's diagonally and so on. No, it counts the horizontal part. And any reserve unit not set up on the battlefield by the end of the battle counts are destroyed. So it's something that you have to pay attention about. Then we had the part about the transports. About the transports, it's something that you use quite often on Warhammer 40k, so you have to remember. About the transport, it's a keyword that the mod has that can allow him to embark and disembark models. Remember that, and can be also only disembark. Think about drop pods for the Space Marines, for example. The transport capacity, it's the number of models that it can include, so pay attention about such. And a unit can embark within a friendly transport if all of its models are normal, advanced, or fallback, move within 3 inches of that transport. Remember, within, not wholly, but within. And it's nice that allow you also if you fall back, because it can save eventually the unit. A unit cannot embark and disembark in the same phase. This is important because it's useful to make that you can't improve the movement of a unit, because if you think about a raid or so on, that you can arrive from the back, embark and disembark again, it's something that it's not okay, because it means that you can gain all the length and even more about the length that you can maybe approach to a unit or so on. So it's important such rule. Then we had the part about the firing deck, because some unit has the option about being able to firing when are embarked on a transport. So there is a rule that it's a firing deck X, so each time this transport should select a weapon from up to X model embarked within, this transport cost has been equipped with those weapons as well. So it's nice and it's a way to make them firing. About the barking, I want to remind you that it's something that we've seen before, but about the disembarking, we have some rules that you have really to pay attention. First of all, with the start your movement phase, embark within a transport can disembark this phase, provided that their transport has not advanced or fold back. If a unit disembarked before the transport move, it cannot normally, and it's a way to make that the unit improve the range, because you have to disembark wholly within 3 inch of the transport itself. So it means that you can gain 3 inch to your movement. Not bad at all. Then if a unit disembark before, if the unit is disembarked after its transport moves, it cannot move or charge this turn. So you have to pay attention about, because you have to pay quite a lot of attention about how you decide to make, so move the transport and then disembark, or that can be anyway useful, because maybe you need the better movement of the transport so that you are closer to an objective, to shooting or so on. Can be anyway quite nice, but you have to remember about such difference. Disembark unit must be set up wholly within, as I said, of the transport and not within engagement range of any enemy models. I think that it's obvious but better clarified. Unit that disembark this unit cannot remain stationary, so they are considered moved. Based on every rules that you can have, they have moved. So pay attention about such. About the destroyed transport, we can find different rules. First of all, until the start of its control period next command phase, that unit is battle-shocked, the one that is forced to disembark by the option. Units that disembark from a destroyed transport are not affected by that model, definitely the mice ability, that it's the explosion, simply about. Instead, you must roll 1d6 for each disembarking unit model. For each roll of 1, the disembark model unit suffers 1 mortal wound, and it's not a good thing anyway. In addition, if a unit disembarks from a destroyed model, you have to remember that until the end of the turn, that unit count as having made a normal move this turn, and you cannot declare a charge this turn. So quite a lot of options that you have to remember. So if a transport is destroyed, remember that any embarking unit must disembark. Roll a d6 for each mod that is embarked, and on 1, so it suffers 1 mortal wound, so it can eventually kill models at the end, even if they have more than 1 wounds. Until the start of its control period next command phase, the unit is considered battle-shocked, and it's important about controlling objects and so on. Until the end of the turn, the unit count as having made a normal wound, so pay attention. About the emergency disembarkation, remember that unit disembark a destroyed transport that cannot be set up wholly within 3 inch of it must perform an emergency disembarkation. This is quite important because there are situations when, for example, you are surrounded by enemy unit and so on, or the shanky features can't allow you to do this. So there are a lot of ways that can be applied about the emergency disembarkation. So unit disembarking a destroyed transport that cannot be set up wholly within 3 inch must be set up wholly within 6 inch of it instead of wholly within 3 inch, but you suffer 1 mortal wound for each of 1 to 3 instead of 1 single. So it's quite a lot of amazing improvement about the lethality of such move, and any disembark model that cannot be set up is destroyed. It's obvious, but better to remember. And then we had the shooting phase. Remember that the part about the hitting, wounding, damaging, and saving, it's common from the shooting and the melee, the combat part. So remember about such. Anyway, we go to see. The first thing to notice is that we had to select the eligible unit, the unit that has not advanced or fell back, select the target, make the ranged attacks, and repeat for the next eligible unit. About selecting the target, remember that before a unit shoots, select the target for all of its ranged weapons. So you select before to roll. At least one model in the target unit must be visible to the attacking model and within range of its weapons being used. Models with more than one ranged weapon can shoot them at the same or different targets, so they can split the firing, but model cannot split attacks from the same weapon across more than one target, so pay attention about such distinguish. Model in the same unit can shoot at the same or different targets, so you can make that the same unit can be using on different units, quite nice. Then we have lone operative, so that unless part of an attaching unit, this unit can only be selected as the target of a ranged attack if the attacking model is within 12 inches, so a way to protect the characters. Then we have the making the ranged attacks, so when a model shoots a weapon, it makes a number of attacks equal to that weapon attack characteristic. They resolve all the attacks against one unit before resolving attacks against any other unit. So deciding how to proceed the order, it's important. Resolve all attacks made with the same weapon profile before resolving attacks with any other profile. If a weapon was in range and its target was visible when selected, the weapon attacks can always be made. So this it's important because, for example, if you're going to remove the models and so on, you still can shoot. It's important. About the locked in combat, it's that unit cannot shoot while within engagement range of enemy units. A unit cannot shoot at targets within engagement range of friendly units. You know that monster and vehicle units are an exception, and we'll see quite soon. The stat is that if every model in a unit has this ability, then each time a ranged attack is made against it, subtract 1 from the attack hit roll. So not bad because it goes on the hit roll. And then we see about the monsters and vehicles that we see with the rule big guns never tire, so that monster and vehicle can shoot and be shot at even while they are within engagement range of any unit. Each time a ranged attack is made by or against such a unit, subtract 1 from attacks it throws, unless shooting with a pistol, that it's an exception. So this it's quite important to understand the power of monsters and vehicles. Then we have the part about making attacks that we have to remember that it's common for the shooting and the combat. About making rolls, we had the hit roll, the wound roll, the allocate attack, the saving throw, and the inflict damage. Here we have to see that the hit roll, we had two options. The one about the ranged attacks and the one about the melee attack. It's the same as proceed, so you have to make the result on a d6 equal or exceed that value, but it's different from the melee and the shooting one. Had a critical hit, so unmodified hit roll of 6, it's always successful. Unmodified hit roll of 1, it's always fail as before. And hit roll can never be modified but more than +1 or -1. This is quite important because maybe you can have more malus, more bonus and so on, but the final effect is anyway a +1 or -1. So pay attention about such. About the wound roll, you have a characteristic that we've seen quite a lot in the editions about Warhammer 40k. So if the strength is twice of the weapon, obviously that can be the shooting or the melee, we have to distinguish the two of them. So the strength is twice or more than twice the fullness, so you confront the strength to the fullness of the models, so of the weapon, of the model, and of your own one that attacks against the opponent one. So if 2 plus, in this case, it's twice or more. If it's greater than the fullness, on a 3 plus. If it's equal, it's 4 plus. If it's less than the fullness, it's 5 plus. If it's half or less than half, then the fullness is 6. So it means that on a 6 anyway you wound, so not a problem. Then we can go to see about some things. Again, had a critical wound, so a modified wound roll of 6 is always successful. A modified wound roll of 1 is always fail. A wound roll can never be modified by more than 1 in plus or minus. Again, you can have in more bonus, more malus and so on, but the final result is that the modifier can't be more than +1 or -1. Then we had the allocate attack. So if a model is in the target unit has already lost any wound or had attacks allocated to its phase, the attack must be allocated to that model. So pay attention about such. And then we had the saving throw. So roll a d6 and modify by the attack AP, so armor penetration. If the result is less than the save of the model being rolled for, the saving throw is failed and the model suffers damage. Otherwise, the attack is saved. A modified saving throw of 1 always fail. A saving throw can never be improved by more than +1. So again, remember that you can gain quite a lot of bonuses, but eventually you can ignore them and having a +1, but it's useful eventually to save for the IP. So it's nice. And there is also a particular thing to remember about the vulnerable saves. These are something that you make other than the armor. So invulnerable saves never modified by the attacks army penetration. So nice. The controller player can choose to use waiver the model's invulnerable save or its saving characteristic, because sometimes it happens things, for example, about the Terminators and so on, that has 2 different saves. Sometimes anyway it's better to use the armor save. Sometimes it's nullified because it's too much the random so on, and so you have the vulnerable save or the almost equal so on or other things. So it's really quite important. Then we had the inflicting damages. So a model loses a number of wounds equal to the attack damage characteristic, and if a model is destroyed by an attack, any excess damage inflicted by that attack is lost. This is a quite important difference, for example, from Age of Sigmar, and it's an old rule about Warhammer 40k. So it means that you can try to absorb eventually quite a lot of wounds with models that have, for example, small amount of wounds and go against models that make a lot of damage for each attack. About the Phenopains, we had that there is Phenopain X+. So each time this model wound loses a wound, roll a d6, and if the result equal or exceed that x, that wound is not lost. We had Deadly Demise, so that when this model is destroyed, roll a d6. On a 6, each unit within 6 inches suffer x mortal wounds. This is, for example, the explosion for the vehicles. And then we had the mortal wounds. These are really quite important because are something completely different from the normal wounds. So each mortal wound inflicted on a unit causes one model in that unit to lose 1 wound. No saving throws can be made against mortal wounds. Mortal wounds inflicted by attacks always apply after any normal damage, even if the damage was saved. So pay attention about such. And remember that because you can't do the saving throws, you can't do also the invulnerable saves, other than maybe there are invulnerable saves that make you saving such mortal wounds. That could be. So pay attention about such thing. Then we can find example about this of fast dice rolling. This is something that you have to completely understand because it's something that it's important. For example, this it's allocate about the different type, because if they make more random wounds, you have to remember that you have to throw once for each one. If the attacks may be allocated to a target inflict random damage, you cannot use the fast dice rolling approach exactly as stated above. You will need to roll the dice one at a time. Consider several attacks with a damage characteristic of B3, for example, being allocated to a target containing the models with 2 wounds each, and excess damage is lost each time a model is destroyed. the order in which the attacks are located are resolved becomes important. So if the result of these defrees were 1, 2, and freeze, the attacks would result in a total of 2 destroyed models, but applying them in the order of 3, then 2, and then 1 would result in the models being destroyed out and the third being damaged, with only 1 wound remaining. As such, the roll should be made one at a time. So remember that this is quite important because it could be a way to give an advantage or disadvantage to your opponent. So you have to remember that this is really quite important one to do and to remember because it's really important. And I've had the weapon abilities that are abilities that the weapons shooting and melee have in addition to their profile, so we go to see them. So we have the assault, so that can be shot if the bear has advanced. So I said I told you about exceptions, here it is. We have rapid fire, so we have rapid fire X, so increase the attack by X when the target unit is within half range. It's a classical one, but always nice. But remember that this is within half range, so it's not also if it remained stationary, and it can be quite interesting. We'll see if the Marines will have some change about such rule and so on, but okay. Then we had the in your cover, so weapons in your cover in the profile are known as in your cover weapon. Each time an attack is made with such weapon, the target cannot have the benefit for cover against that attack. That can be quite nice. Linked. So if the profile are known as this, each time an attack is made with such weapon, you can re-roll the attack's wound rolls. We had the pistols. Here we've seen before about the monsters, for example. So it can be shot even if the bear unit is within the engagement roll of enemy unit, but must target one of those enemy units. So pay attention about such a day because it's important. It cannot be shot alongside any other non-pistol weapons except by monsters or vehicles. I don't remember. No, maybe some dreadnought, if they are considered vehicles, could be an example of models that have the pistols and are anyway able to shoot with other weapons. Then we have torrent, so that this makes that each time an attack is made with such weapon, that attack automatically hits the target. It's always nice, this one, because it make lose one of the throwing, so decrease amount of hits. Then we have lethal hits, so each time an attack is made with such a weapon, a critical hit automatically wound the target. We have lance, each time an attack is made with such weapon, if the bear made a charge move this turn, add 1 to the attack wound roll. It's always nice. Then we have indirect fire, that it's something that we've seen quite often, so that make that can target and make attacks against units that are not visible to the attack unit. If no model are visible in the target unit when it is selected, then when making an attack against the target with an indirect fire weapon, subtract 1 from that attack it roll, and the target has the benefit of cover against that attack. This anyway it's nice because anyway it make you hit and target units that are hiding, control objects that are hidden, and so on. So in a way it can be useful. For example, think about the whirlwind. It's one of my favorite units that use such rule. Then we have the position, so when it targeting and attacking an attached unit, remember the attached unit is so related about the character. The attacking model player can have the attack allocated to a character model in that unit visible to the player. So nice, because it make lose the option about the bodyguard, or at least part of the option about the bodyguard. We have then blast, so that add 1 to the attack characteristic for every 5 models in the target unit, rounding down, can never be used against a target that is within the engagement range of any unit from the attacking model's army, including its own. So pay attention about such. We have meta, that it's meta X, so increase the damage by X when targeting units within half range. And it's not bad. It depends by the, I can say, range of such weapons. Because, for example, think about the meta pistols for the blood engines and so on. Then we have heavy, so add 1 to hit rolls if the bear unit remains stationary this turn. Quite nice. Remember that if you disembark, it doesn't apply the remain stationary, even if you have such rule eventually. And then here we can see an example of different weapons that are always nice to see. So the shooting and the melee ones. They have the hazardous. So after a unit shoot or fight, roll one hazardous test, 1d6, for each hazardous weapon used. For each one model equipped with a hazardous weapon is destroyed. Characters, models, and vehicles suffer 3 mortal wounds instead. So okay, you have to pay quite a lot of attention about such, because it can be really damaging. So pay attention, but it can be also nice, I think, because they can give you quite a lot of power. Had then devastating wounds, so a critical wound inflict mortal wounds equal to the weapon damage characteristic instead of any normal damage. And remember that it can be quite useful against model that has a really good saving throw. This one, so nice. Has sustained hits, so each critical hit score X additional hits on the target, so unmodified hit with 6. So we have extra attacks. The builder can attack with this weapon in addition to any other weapon it can make attacks with. It's always something that it's welcome. Then we have anti. So anti a keyword X and a modified wound roll of X plus against a target with the matching keyword scores a critical wound. So quite nice, because it's a way to improve the critical wound and it's a way to damage better, because it can wound better, so always welcome. About the charge phase, it's quite similar to what we've seen about the shooting phase. So we had to select the eligible unit, select the targets, make the charge roll, make the charge move, and repeat for the next eligible unit. Remember that about the charge bonus, each time a unit makes a charge move until the end of the turn, that unit has the fight first ability. This it's something that you have always to remember, because it's important as rule, but we'll see later. So about this, remember that a unit that is eligible to charge, it is one that is within 12 inch of one or more enemy unit at the start of your charge phase, unless it is a unit that has advanced or fall back in this turn, a unit that is within the engagement range of any enemy model, so it's yet in close combat, and that unit is an aircraft unit that has different rules. So, about charging with a unit, we have to remember that you have to charge with a roll of 2d6. Target of a charge must be within 12 inch but not need to be visible. This is quite important. If the distance rolls is sufficient to move within the engagement range for all the targets while maintaining the unit coherency, the charge fail. Cannot move within the engagement range of any unit that was not a target of the charge, because you have to declare the charge, the unit that you are going to charge. This is quite a lot difference of Age of Sigmar, so pay attention about such a thing, because it's really important. Then, if the charge is successful, each model makes a charge move less than or equal to the charge roll and must move into base-to-base contact with an enemy model if possible. So it's something that you have to think about. Okay, also the charging over the terrain, so models can be moved freely over terrain featured 2 or less in height. We have seen before about such. Models cannot move through terrain featured that taller than 2 inch, but can climb up and down them. So this is something that will be quite intriguing about. So you have to think really, because you have really to think about how far you have from such scenic feature to be able to charge. Also charging with flying models. So remember that the models with the keyword fly can move over models when they make a charge move. And fly mod that start or end a charge move on a terrain feature measure distance moved through the air when they make a charge move. We've seen before about this, but it's something that you have to remember. And then we had this amazing artwork that it's always amazing. Then we had the fight phase, because after the charge, there is the fighting. And then we had the fight phase. Here we had two things to notice. The first one, it's about the units that fight first are the ones that going to be the first one, and then all the other ones. About these are the ones that gain the rule, the charge, so they gain the rule fight first. So they are the ones that make the attacks before. But remember that once that these are done, or if also the opponent has such type of unit that fight first as a rule, you have to alternate the units that are eligible to fight. So this, it's not something that you do all your units because you turn to, no. You make the charging because you had the fighting first because you are charged, but then you alternate, and the units that start after the fight first are from the opponent. So the opponent is the one that choose in your turn, and vice versa. In the opponent turn, it will be you that choose the first eligible unit to fight, if not the fight first. So pay attention about such. Remember that you must fight. You can't choose not to fight with a unit. You must fight. And remember that you alternate, and if you finish all your units that are fighting, the opponent can do. After that, everything is ended. Then you move to the next step. It's simple one as option, but it's really quite interesting about this. And then we had the remaining combat, and then we had the fight itself. We had different options about better, the different segments about this. So we had the pile-in, so you approach better to the opponent. We had the making the melee attacks, so select the weapon, select the targets, and make the attacks. About making attacks we have seen before. And then we had the consolidate. About the pile-in, we had a pile-in that is up to 3 inch, and every model that moves must end closer to the closest enemy model and in base-to-base contact with an enemy model if possible. So here it's important because this unit must end in the unit connected and within the engagement range of at least one enemy unit or model can pile in, or no model can pile in. Then we had the make the melee attacks, and the model which can fight are the model that can fight it is within the range of an enemy unit. A model can fight if it is in base-to-base contact with other models for its own unit that is itself in base-to-base contact with an enemy unit. About here you have to pay attention because it can be that you can charge maybe some damage or so on because you charge to some units and try to use the pile-in to move aside eventually some of the models, ignoring a part of the unit that you charge to. Because remember that you have to select before the unit that you are going to charge. Then you have to select the weapon. So each model that can fight does so using one of its melee weapon, obviously. And each model makes a number of attacks equal to the attack characteristic of its selected weapon. About the targets, select the targets for all attacks before they are resolved. So it means that you can't see how it go and then correct, but you declare which attack go on which unit before to roll the dice. And attacking model must either be within the engagement range of an enemy unit to target it, or in base-to-base contact with other models in its unit that is itself in base-to-base contact with that enemy unit. This is important, and I want to make you notice base-to-base contact. So not half an inch of distance, not something. No, you have to make close base-to-base contact. So even if it's not in base-to-base combat, you can't attack with that model. It's an important limitation about such, so pay attention. Then you had the making attacks that we've seen before, how it's done. Eventually you can recover about that detail. So resolve all attacks against one unit before moving on to the next one. Resolve all attacks with the same weapon profile before resolving any made with a different weapon profile. All attacks declared against the target unit are resolved even if no models in that unit remains within the engagement range. So it means that as for the shooting, you declare before, you know before which unit you can do, and also the models can attack. Even if the opponent try to remove the models so that it can distance from yourself, there is not a range as for Age of Sigmar, so it can't make out of the combat. Till the combat is ended, at least that sequence, you have all the attacks that you program to have on that unit available, and you have to do them, you must do them. Then you have the consolidate, so that it's a move up to 3 inch, that if every model that move must end closer to the closest enemy model and in base-to-base contact with an enemy model if possible. Remember that if you're not able to make base-to-base contact, you are not able to attack later. The unit must end up in unit currency, and within engagement range of at least one enemy unit if possible, because maybe you are disengaged from one unit because you don't have, or you select one or you select the other one, maybe because you are not enough base to be able. If the above is not possible, each model can move towards the closest objective market, but this must result in the unit being within range of it and unit currency. So it's quite limiting about this one to be able to move in such a way, but anyway, it's an option, and it allows you to be even better toward that objective. And if the above is not possible, no model can consolidate. So it's really quite intriguing about how it works. Simple, but it has really some blind ones. So you have to make base-to-base contact to be able, you can improve, you can using the movement of the base so that you can even use the plugin to improve the amount of models that you can use, but you are limited to only base-to-base contact or base-to-base contact with models that are base-to-base contact. So you have no problems about the range of the weapons, but you have to pay attention about the distances of the models from the units. So it's something that you have to think about. Here we have an example of how it works, and it's always welcome. Then have the datasheets, and here it can make you see how it done, the datasheet, so how you can refer, so you can find the part about how it works, the different characteristics of the model, the abilities and so on, the part about the keywords. So it's quite simple, but I'm interested more about the things that we need to understand. So, for example, we had the part about the move, the fullness, the save, the wounds, the leadership, but it's important about the object control, that it shows how effectively a model can exert control over an object on the battlefield. So it's nice, and it's something that you have to remember. And here we have also to see about the leadership test. So if a rule requires you to make a leadership test for a unit, roll 2d6 if the total is greater than or equal to the best leadership characteristic in that unit, that test is best. Otherwise, it is failed. So remember that the leadership, higher it is, worse it is. So it's something that you have to pay quite a lot of attention about such thing, because it's something that it's important. And remember that the OC is related about the model. So it means that the number of models that it has a unit, it improves eventually the OC related about. And it's really quite intriguing one. We have also the part about the random characteristics. So some characteristics are random value and you roll based on what you need. So pay attention about such. We have the aura abilities that has a range. Psychic weapons and abilities that are, some weapons and abilities can only be used by psyker. Such weapons and abilities are tagged with the word psychic. If a psychic weapon or ability causes a unit to suffer one or more wounds, each of those wounds is considered to have been inflicted by a psychic attack that maybe can be used for saving or so on in different ways. I'm quite curious about how it is developed and so on. And I've had the deployment abilities. And I've had the deployment abilities. These are abilities that let you deploy, literally, the charter or the units on the battlefield directly or subtly, so that you can make them come back later, for example, with the reinforcements that we see in the movement phase. So this is something that you have to understand, because you can change the way that you can play the units themselves. For example, we had the deep strike that during the declared battle formation step, it let you put this unit that has such rule in reserve, and so this is to put there instead on the battlefield, and then you can set up this unit in your reinforcement step more than 9 inch horizontally away from all enemy units. So as you can see, it's really quite interesting. Then we had the scouts, and here we have something that can be interesting, because we have Scout X, so you can make a normal move up to X before the first turn begins. So as usual, and it's really quite interesting. And if embarked in a dedicated transport, that dedicated transport can make this move instead. Remember that it has to be a dedicated transport, not a transport where you put the unit inside. It's a lot of difference about. And must send this move more than 9 inch horizontally away from all enemy models. In a way, it could be really quite interesting, because it makes you that you can approach, and eventually you can try to, for example, go to conquer objective. You can try to make that you can go close so that you can make disembarking and move and assault or shoot or other things. So it's really quite interesting about such things. Then we have infiltrators that during the deployment, if every mod in a unit has this ability, remember that all the mods in the unit has to have such, so it's a keyword that it's important. Then when you set up this, it can be set up anywhere on the battlefield more than an inch from horizontally away from all enemy from the enemy deployment zone and all enemy models. So it's really quite interesting. It's outside of the deployment zone of the enemy, but anyway it's quite interesting because it lets you approach, and so again it can let you conquer objects and so on. It's really quite interesting. Then we had the leader, that it's something that we've seen before because it's about the units that can be combined together. So this is the rule that let you do such. So before the battle, characters, remember before the battle, character units with the leader ability can be attached to one of their bodyguard unit to form the attached unit. Attached unit can only contain one leader, so you can't make a mix of multiple leaders eventually. And attacks cannot be allocated to certain models in attached unit. Remember that there is an exception about such in the rule about the weapons, but anyway, it's something that is specific. So it's really quite interesting about, and really, remember that the bodyguard unit contain a leader. It is known as attached unit with the exception of the rules that are triggered, that are destroyed and so on that we've seen before. Each time an attack that targets an attached unit until the attacking unit has resolved all its attacks, you must use the fortune characteristic of the bodyguard models in that unit, even if the leader in that unit has a different focus characteristic. This is quite important because it makes you understand that if it has a better fullness, it's good. If it has a lower one, you risk to have more damages coming up. But the bodyguard exists because this. So pay attention about such. Moreover, each time an attack successfully wounds an attached unit, that attack cannot be allocated to a character model in that unit, even if the character model has lost one or more wound or has already had attacks allocated to it in this phase. So this makes that you have to pay attention because it's a really good protection about such type of characters eventually. But remember that I had to add the leader one as keyword. Here the artwork are also amazing. And then we had the stratagems. About the stratagems, we have seen how to gain the command points that are useful to be able to use such ones that are in the command phase. And about the generation, we can see them later. There are different types of stratagems that are the battle tactics, the the strategic ploy, and the war gear. So pay attention about such. Remember that the stratagem key can be used in either player turns, your turn, or opponent turn. And we have different ones available. So we have command reroll. So in any phase, just after you have made a hit roll, wound roll, or damage roll, or a saving throw, an advanced roll, a charge roll, or desperate escape test, a hazard test, or just after you have rolled a dice to determine the number of attacks made with a weapon for an attack model or a unit from your army, you can reroll the test or saving throw. So it's really quite useful. It's one of the common ones used in the previous edition, and also here it's really quite interesting. Then we had the counter offensive that it costs even 2 command points, so you have to pay attention when to use such one. The previous one, it's quite cheap because it's 1 command point. Remember that you can use only one stratagem in the phase, so pay attention about such because it can be problematic because you can use the same stratagem multiple times during a battle, but you can't use the same stratagem more than once in the same phase. Remember that you can use more stratagem in the same phase, not the same anyway. Then we had the counter offense that is 2 command points, so that when fight phase, just after an enemy unit has fought, you can make that one unit from your army that is within the engagement range of one or more enemy unit and that has not already been selected to fight can fight next. So this it's quite interesting to interrupt the sequence of the opponent. For example, think about the part of the charging. So the opponent charge as the strike first and use this to attack. It's a way. Then we have epic challenge that costs 1 command point, and when fight phase, when a character unit from your army that is within the engagement range of one or more attached unit is selected to fight, you select one charge mode in your unit, obviously, and remember that you can have only one charge for each of such attached unit inside. It's that until the end of the phase, all melee attack made by that mode have the precision ability. Remember to see about this rule in the previous options. Then we have insane bravery that costs 1 command point. It's applied when the battle shock step of your command phase, just after you have failed a battle shock test taken for a unit from your army, and so you target that the unit from your army that the battle shock test was just taken for, even though your battle shock units cannot normally be affected by your stratagem. So this is an important exception to that one. Remember that this is important that is specified, otherwise it would be impossible to use such stratagem. And your unit is treated as having passed that test instead and is not battle shocked as a result. It's really quite important, this one, because it lets you avoid, you can only apply once, okay, because it applies only once per turn, but anyway, per phase, but anyway, it's really quite important, this one. Then you have the grenade, that it's 1 command point in your shooting phase, 1 grenade unit from your army that is not within the engagement range of any enemy unit and has not been selected to shoot this phase. Select 1 enemy unit that is not within engagement range of any unit from your army and is within 8 inch of and visible to your grenade unit. Roll 6d6 for each 4+, that enemy unit suffer 1 mortal wound. This is not bad, because you have 6d6 on a 4+, so it can be really quite useful, this one, because this can allow you to create quite a lot of damage and there are mortal wound. So not bad. The range is small because it's only 8 inch, but it's really something that you can really try eventually, because it's I think one of the most interesting, because it can cause mortal wounds. Then you have tank shock that make that in your charge phase 1 vehicle unit from your army, so the target is only the ones that have the keyword vehicle. Until the end of the phase, after your unit ends a charge move, select 1 enemy unit within engagement range of it, then select 1 melee weapon your unit is equipped with, roll a number of d6 equal to that weapon's strength characteristic. If that strength characteristic is greater than the enemy unit toughness characteristic, roll 2 additional d6. For each 5+, that enemy unit suffer 1 mortal wound to a maximum of 6 mortal wounds. This could be really quite interesting if you think about the Dreadnought, because they are quite intriguing, or also about some vehicles. So think about a Raider eventually. It could be interesting, I think. Then you have Rapid Ingress, that make that for 1 command point, you can, at the end of your opponent movement phase, you can make that 1 unit from your army that is in reserve. Your unit can arrive in the battlefield as if it were the reinforcement step of your movement phase. You can think that it's not good, but it means that you can arrive in the opponent movement phase, so deploy in that way, and your next movement you can eventually move and so on, be free, or if you had to shoot, you are yet here. So it's not so bad, you have to pay attention, but remember that as a restriction you can use this stratagem to enable a unit to arrive on the battlefield during a battle round. It will normally not be able to do so in. So pay attention, because there are some limitations about this, but still it could be really quite interesting. Then we have Fire Overwatch. So again, the Overwatch, it's something that it's a stratagem. It costs 1 command point. So when your opponent movement or charge phase, just after the enemy unit is set up, or when an enemy unit starts or end a normal advance, fallback, or charge move, 1 unit from your army that is within 24 inch of that enemy unit that will be eligible to shoot if it were your shooting phase. Your unit can shoot to that enemy unit as if it were your shooting phase. This is really quite amazing. And remember that as restriction until the end of the phase, each time a mod in your unit makes a ranged attack and a modified hit roll of 6 is required to score a hit, irrespective of the attacking weapon basilisk skill of any modifier. You can only use this stratagem once per turn. Okay, it's not a problem, but it's something amazing. It refers about once per turn because you can do it in the movement or charge phase. So not to apply it 2 times, so for each phase, it's better to specify such one. And this is quite amazing because if you think you don't even need to have a really grit thing, so something that has a grit ballistic skill, you only need something that shoot a lot. More shoot, better it is this firewall watch. Moreover, because it is within 24 inch about this, and really remember that anyway it will be eligible to shoot as if it were your shooting phase, but you had to still follow the range and so on about the weapons of the unit. So you can't make that it's within the 24 inch and then you can shoot everything that you want, even if it's out of the reach of that specific weapon. So pay attention because there is some limitation about. Then go to the ground, that again for one command point, when your opponent shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its target, one infantry, remember only keyword infantry unit from your army that was selected as the target of one or more of the attacking unit attacks, until the end of the phase, all models in your unit have a 6+ invulnerable save and have the benefit of cover. You could think that it's not so great, but it means that even if the unit is in open space, you gain the benefit of cover and you gain a 6+ invulnerable save. That it could be seen as nothing much, but in a way remember that you avoid any problem about the penetration. So you had the option about being able to save eventually some wounds or so on. So it could be really quite interesting. Then you have the small screen that when, for one command point, when your opponent shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its target, you can use the smoke unit from your army, that usually it's referred about the vehicles with the smoke screen, grenades and so on, that was selected as the target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. Until the end of the phase, all models in your unit has the benefit of cover and the stealth ability. Remember, the stealth ability decrease the option about being hit, and the cover it increase your saving, so it's really not bad at all. So this it's really quite intriguing about. Then you have heroic intervention, 2 command points. When your opponent charge phase, just after an enemy unit ends a charge move, one unit from your army that is within 6 inches of that enemy unit and will be eligible to declare a charge against the enemy unit if it were your charge phase, your unit now declares a charge that targets only that enemy unit, and you resolve the charge as it were your charge phase. So it's really a counter charge. This one it's nice. And restriction is that if you can only select a vehicle unit from your army if it is a walker. So remember that you have to pay attention. So being a walker, I have to see if the dreadnought will fall in such category, but pay attention because you have such limitation about, and none then even if this charge is successfully, your unit does not receive any charge bonus this turn. So it means that if it has, for example, the ability lance, it can't have such options eventually. So remember about such limitation, but they are really quite interesting. And then we have the strategic themselves. We've seen such ones that arrive at the movement phase and so on. So we have simply to mount what they require. So remember that about this, you have to place, or better, you can place a maximum of unit in the strategic reserves that are related about the battle size. So pay attention about, and the command points are the value that you place in the strategic reserves before the battle, including those embarked with transport models that are themselves placed into the strategic reserves, and you cannot exceed the 25% of your total point limit for your chosen battle side. So it means that if you have an incursion, it's maximum of 250 points. Strike force, that is the usual 2000 points arm, is 500 points. On slope, the 3000 more, it's 750. So you have to pay attention because units that are not destroyed at the start of the battle can be put in strategic reserves. The combined point value cannot exceed 25% point of your total armies once, and you cannot put fortification into strategic reserves. Fortification, I think that it's almost obvious, because or you are able to deploy them from outside, making them fall in from the space, or they have to be yet there eventually, so it's something that it's not a problem. So arriving from the strategic reserves, remember that the unit can arrive into the reinforcement step of your mount phase from the second battle round onwards. This is quite important because you want to remember the stratagem that allow you to make, and so in the first turn you can't arrive. It's a bit of pity because it's something that I always like, but also in the previous edition, for example, they cast the option about being able to arrive in the first turn. So, and those not on the battlefield at the end of the battle count are destroyed, are counted as destroyed. So you have to pay attention about such. And about the setting up these ones, remember that during the second battle round, set up wholly within 6 inches of any battlefield edge, not in the enemy deployment zone. From the third battle round onwards, set up wholly within 6 inches of any battlefield edge, and cannot be set up within 9 inches of any enemy models. So this it's something that is important, moreover, because it distinguishes how you can arrive in the second and in the third battle round. So it's something that you have to pay attention, because it changes, be able to arrive from any battlefield edge but not the enemy one, and instead be able to arrive also from the opponent side. So you have to pay attention, because it's really quite strategic about such. It's really strategic. And then we had the terrain features that each of these has its own rules. So we had the benefit of the cover, so that with the cover we had that we add 1 to the armor saving throw against ranged attacks, only against ranged attacks. It does not apply to models with a save of 3+, or better against attacks with an AP of 0. So it's something that you have to remember, and moreover, if you play Space Marines, because usually they have a save of 3+. So this is something that you have to remember. Remember that against a AP of 0. So if they have an AP of 1, you can have this bonus applied. And multiple instances are not cumulative, so you can't apply such one. It's anyway a simple +1. So here it's something that you have to remember, because anyway you can't have a bonus better than +1 applied. And then had the rules about the ones, so we have the craters and rubble. These make that the models can be moved over distant future as described. As you can see, there is the normal visibility and rules apply, and you can gain the benefit of the coverage. So each time a ranged attack is allocated to an infantry, remember only infantry model that is wholly on top of this terrain feature, that model has the benefit of cover against that attack. Remember, wholly on such one. So if the unit want to have such protection, you have to have all the unit wholly. If it's partially, that model at least will have some problems, so you have to pay attention about. They have the barricades of and fuel of pipes, so that the model can move up, over and down this terrain feature, but they can be set up at the end of any kind of move on top of it. So you have to pay attention, because you can be on one of the side but not move up of it. The visibility, it's normal, the visibility rule applies, so you have to see what you can see. It's usually all completely fully seen or partially seen, the models or the units eventually. The engagement range make that in the charge phase, if an enemy unit is within 1 inch of this terrain feature, a charge unit on the opposite side of this terrain feature can still make a charge move against the enemy unit, provided it ends that the charge move as close as possible to this terrain feature and within 2 inches of that enemy unit. So it can be seen as barrier, but it's a fragile barrier, so it can be anyway be done. And in the fight phase, units that are able to fight and models can make attack if the attack is on the opposite side of this terrain feature and within 2 inches of them. Remember that it's an exception about how you select the model that can fight. This is something that's interesting. And the benefit of cover is that each time a ranged attack is allocated to an infantry, again, only infantry model that is wholly within 3 inches of this terrain feature, if that model is not fully visible to every model to the attack unit because of the terrain feature, that model has the benefit of cover against that attack. So it's nice. as keyword as obstacle and barricade. Instead, before we've seen that it's area, terrain, and crater. And then we have the battlefield debris and statuary. So here we can find that the mod can move up, over, and down this terrain feature, but they cannot be set up or end any kind of move on top of it. So you have to pay attention about such, because the volley model eventually has ability. So with visibility, the normal visibility rules apply, so you have to determine one. So each time a ranged of attack as benefit of cover is allocated to a model of, and if that model is not fully visible to every model in that attack unit because of this turn feature, the model has the benefit of cover against that attack. So if you're able to at least make one model hidden, it's a way to have such one, so it's not bad. And the keyword are obstacle and battlefield debris, so nice. Then have East industrial structure, sealed building and armored contains, so that this terrain feature are raised area that model can be set up on top of and or a move on top of it, because are something that it's a solid, so it can be put on it. And provide that the model base does not overhang the terrain feature. So if the model does not have a base, no part of that model that would be in contact with the battlefield at the ground can be overhang that terrain feature. So it has to be fully within such one. So you have to pay attention eventually. And you have to make that this, in addition, other terrain feature can be set up on top of a hill terrain feature, or provided to no part of those terrain feature overhang that hill terrain feature. So it's simply a healing, okay? And the benefit of cover is that each time a ranged attack is allocated to a model, and if that model is not fully visible to every model in that attacking unit because of this terrain feature, that model has to be benefit of cover against that attack. So simple but interesting eventually. So it's generic one. Then we have the woods, that it's always something complicated to deploy and so on, but it's always nice to play in a dead forest or so on. So as footprint, when this feature is set up on the battlefield, both players must agree upon its footprint. That is the boundary of the terrain feature at the ground level. This is so that the player know when a model is wholly within the terrain feature. If this terrain feature is mounted on a base, then this is defined as a footprint. Eventually, take a paper and cut the round about the area of such woods so that you are not having a problem. The movement is that you can move over distant feature as usual, and visibility is that models and units that are wholly within distant feature are never considered to be fully visible to an observed model. Similarly, if a model that is not wholly within this terrain feature must look through or over this terrain feature, or order to draw a line of sight to another model, then the other model is never considered to be fully visible to that observing model. And so if it will have the benefit to cover from this terrain feature, aircraft and towering models are exception to this. Visibility to and from such model is determined normally, even if this terrain feature is wholly in between them and the observing model. Models that are wholly within this terrain feature can see out of it normally. Here, I hope that we'll not see as a scene in old years when simply the woods and so on were represented like a shade by a piece of paper when it's written wood. It's good to make the limitation about the size of the wood, not to make it represented like this. So eventually use such one. And as benefit of cover, each time a range status is allocated to a model, if that model is ever wholly within this terrain feature or it is not fully visible to every model in that attacking unit because of this terrain feature, that model has the benefit of cover against that attack. So again, area terrain and woods as keyword. So this is something that you see quite often in the game, because anyway, it's interesting. And then we had the ruins. Here, it can be done in a lot of different ways, so it's really something that it's simple. It's simply part of building or so on. It's not something defined to be able. So about the footprints, again, that's we've seen before, you have to define the area that it is representing such one. So again, a piece of paper or so on, something that make you understand what it is the boundary of such one. You have plunging files, so each time a model that is wholly within this terrain feature makes a ranged attack, if that mod is 6 inch or more vertical from ground level, and every model in that target unit is on the ground level, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. This is a new rule and really quite interesting, because it makes that you can make from the high that you can penetrate better, so not bad. Then we have movement, so that infantry and beast model can move through distant feature, walls, floors, ceiling, gutters, chains, etc. as if it were not there. A model cannot end up and move within a wall, a floor, and so on, so you have to complete the movement. Infantry, beast, and fly models can be set up or end up and move on any floor level of this terrain feature, but if that level is not the ground floor, such model can only do so if their base does not overhang the floor, and that level is if a model does not have any part of the base that it's outside, so it has to be completely inside the floor itself. All other models can only be set up or end they move on the ground floor if this terrain feature it's not allowing the other models to be like this. As visibility, the models cannot see over and through this terrain feature. For example, a unit outside this terrain feature cannot draw a line of sight to a target on the other side of it, even if it would be possible to draw a line of sight to the target through the open windows, doors, and so on. Acted and towering models are an exception to this. Visibility to and from such models is determined normally, even if this terrain feature is wholly in between them and there are observing models. Models can see into this terrain feature normally, and models that are wholly within this terrain feature can see out of it normally. And as benefit of cover, each time a ranged attack is allocated to a model, if that mod is either wholly within this terrain feature or it is not fully visible to every model in the attacking unit because of this terrain feature, that model has benefit of cover against that attack. So it's really quite interesting. Again, Iron Terran and Ruins. So you have quite a lot of options about such ones. And then had the examples of Battlefield. We have seen about the shiny future. Now we can create the Battlefield, and we can create a lot of different options on. We can personalize a lot. It's up to you decide how much. Usually a Battlefield is 44 inch for 60 inch, but eventually you can make it bigger, smaller, so on, based on what you are going to do, the type, so on. But anyway, it's really quite interesting, and you can create your own stories, you can play some missions and so on, but you have a lot of different options. Remember that it's up to you decide how you want to create, and only your fantasy it's the limit about what you can represent. You can create an alien thing, an imperial world, or something specific. It's up to you, but still you have a lot of options about. Then had the aircraft. These as rules that we have seen are different based on the other ones. So about deploying the aircraft, remember that when you are instructed to declare the battle formation, the aircraft models must start the battle in reserve instead of being set up on the battlefield. So you have to remember this, but there is eventually the option about hovering. So some aircraft has the option about hover, and it's to be instructed in the declared battle formation. And so if you do so, if a model is in hover mode, then until the end of the battle, its move characteristic is changed to 20 inch. It loses the keyword aircraft, and it loses also associated route to being a aircraft, so become simply a flying model technically. Models in hover move don't start the battle in reserve, but you can choose to place them on strategic reserves following the normal rules if you wish. So it's a way to make this option available, so use them as normal, eventually as option. About the aircraft in the movement phase, remember that the aircraft can only make a normal move and can do so even when within the engagement range of enemy models. The aircraft must move straight forward and at least 20 inch and make them one pivot of up to 90 degrees up, so it means that you can make no pivot or up to 90 degrees. Then have that the aircraft that cross the edge of the battlefield or that cannot make their minimum move are placed into strategic reserves. So this could be quite interesting, and I think that there will be also some improvement about such usage. Eventually, we see if there will be also some facts about the extant and move of other models. Remember that unit can still make a normal or advanced move if there are only within engagement range of enemy aircraft. Remember that model can move over the engagement range of enemy aircraft, but they cannot finish the movement on the models. Same for the aircraft eventually. They can move over but not stand over the models. So you have to pay attention about the base. And remember that the models can move over the aircraft when they make any kind of move without any problem, as I said. And about the charge and fight phase, all units that can fly can charge and at or make melee attacks against aircraft. So pay attention because this is quite important. Aircraft cannot charge, pile in or consolidate and can only make melee attack against units that can fly. So the fly and the aircraft are the only ones that can see each other. And when a model piles or consolidate, unless it can fly, ignore the aircraft when determining the closest enemy model. This could be quite interesting eventually, so you have to pay a bit of attention. We are here to see a lot of options about describing how to move and so on. And I think that it's good that there is, because they make you understand better how to use such ones. Then how you select your own armies. So you select the battle size. So if it's an incursion, if it is a strike force, if it is an onslaught, then you create your army roster that you can do in the app of Warhammer 40k. I hope that it will be renewed because it's really bad, that one, but still there is the option. Eventually there are also other options to create your army, but still it's simply a calculating of the things that you have, so the unit and the points eventually. You select the army faction, but it's when you create your army roster, so it's not a problem, and you have simply to associate it so that you can know what you are going to play. Then select the detachment rules, that it's the rules that you are going to play with. So I think that it will be the selecting about the specific one. Select the units, and here we have to select all the units you want to include in your army. Your army must include at least one charter unit. Each time a unit include a unit in your army, it can take any upgrade, enhancement or option that it has access to. Note that your army roster, the number of models in the unit and weapon war gear upgrades and any enhancement it has, and its point value. Set out this point value for the total permitted for your battle size, so you create simply the option that you have. You can only include a unit in your army if that unit has a faction keyword you choose up for your army that we've seen before. You have enough points remaining, obviously, because otherwise you bypass the amount that you need, that you have available, and your army does not already contain 3 units with this same datasheet name and that unit, or 6 units with the same datasheet name as that unit if it is a battle line or dedicated transport unit. So it's limited that it's all one, but always nice to see it again. Only charters can be given enhancement, and your army cannot include more than 3 enhancements in total. No unit can have more than 1 enhancement, and each enhancement included in your army must be unique. Epic hero cannot be given any enhancement. Your army cannot include the same epic hero more than once. Are epic heroes, so you can't have 2 Dante, for example, in your army. And remember that every dedicated transport unit from your army must start the battle with at least 1 unit embarked within it, or it cannot be deployed for that battle and will instead count as having been destroyed during the first battle round. This it's crazy, because it means that you are forced to have the unit embarked in dedicated transport. It's not technically a problem, but it's something that it's really a main rule, this one. You have really to pay attention about this. I hope that it will be correct, because otherwise it's wow, you have really to think how you deploy the things, because you risk to lose dedicated transport, and technically you pay for it, at least it seems. So okay, then remember that you select one charter model from your army to be your warlord. This will be the leader of your army, and again the keyword warlord itself. So they are simple ones, but they are really quite interesting things. Something obvious, but something that are details that you have to remember, really. And then about the mission, we have the sequence about what to do about the mission themselves. So master the armies, read the mission objective, create the battlefield, determine the attacker and defender, declare the battle formation, so the leader if attached or not, the units that are in the transport, remember about the dedicated transport. Deploy the armies, make the determine the first turn, resolve the pre-battle rules, begin the battle, end the battle, and determine the victor itself. And then we had the part about the objective market that are physical. So it's something that you had to pay attention and remember that this model of the model a model is within the range of an objective mark if it is within 3 inch horizontally and 5 inch vertical of that objective marker. Remember that a model is within the range to be able to put about this, and the level of control is that you add together the OC characteristic of all of the player models within range of the objective marker, so the 3 inch or 5 inch eventually vertically one, and objective marker is controlled by the player with the highest level of control over it in a time it is contested. Models cannot end up a move on top of an objective marker. This makes the solid of the objective marker. Remember that I created some video about how to create eventually the objective marker for my army of Age of Sigmar, but can be used as a referral also about this, so you can really make a lot of fantasy about size and so on. Usually I think that anyway, an inch normal base 25mm one, it's the best size of a marker, but you can use different ones. About the intent tips, it's referred about, in this case, about the option about open mission and so on, or narrative mission, so that you can put the objective marker on a sharing feature, or you can move a little so that it perfectly suited and so on, closest to the option available, but it's not a problem because it's related about the agreement of both players, and if both players are green, you can do what you want without any problem. Had the mission map key, so the attack deployment zone, the defend deployment zone, the no man's slide, the objective markers, the attacker battle edge, the defender battlefield edge, the center of the battlefield. And here we have only word that it's the mission that is represented here. Remember that in the future we see also other mission, a lot of other mission eventually. So remember that you have to master the armies. There is the mission objectives that are in this case capture and control, that is progressive objective. So starting from the second battle round, at the end of each player command phase, the player whose turn it is scores 1 victory point VP for each objective marked that control to a maximum of 3 victory points per turn. Details of how to control the objective we've seen before. Then we can see about creating the battlefield that is based on the size that you are going to play with. Remember that player must then alternate setting up objectives markers on the battlefield starting from whichever player win off a roll-off until a total of 4 have been placed. Objective marker cannot be placed within 6 inches of any battlefield edge or within 9 inches of any other objective marker. Still, there are enough space and way to play with. You roll off to the time which will be the attacker or the defender. Declare the battle formation that we've seen also before. Then you deploy the armies. You determine the first turn, so you roll off again and winner take the first turn, resolve the pre-battle rules, you begin the battle, and the battle that it's when all the models on one player army has been destroyed or once the 5th battle round has ended, whichever comes first, and about determine the victor if at the end of the battle one army has been destroyed, the player commanding the opponent army is the victor. Otherwise, the player which the most victory points is the victor. In the case of tie, the battle is draw. Here I don't like too much because I prefer before when you could even destroy completely the opponent army, but if it had made more victory points, it had won. So it's not bad this thing, but it's a classic one, but I don't like so much anyway. And about the structure of the table, this it's rotated as usual because usually we have the deployment zone that are on the longer side. Instead, these are on the shorter. It's one of the classical still, but not the basic of the basic. So anyway, it can be interesting to try. Remember that you have to be 24-inch distance from each one, and you have bigger deployment zone available. So it's not bad. It's something a little different to play with, but really quite interesting. So these are the core rules for the new edition, Warhammer 10th edition Leviathan of the Games Workshop. So, from Dynamod, it's everything. I invite you to put a like on this video, to subscribe to the channel, to ring the bell, and to comment this video if you are interested in something about this video or you want to suggest me some arguments for other videos. I hope to see you again. To the next time.